Will do. Thanks.
TC is going to be contacted.
All right. Yeah. So, folks, thanks for joining, making some time here. Obviously, we're trying to get through these requests. I appreciate everybody's responses, and of course, Dan Knappich for kind of helping me go through them and put this process together. Much appreciated. As I mentioned, we have 8 forms that got filled out here, and I think really what we're trying to do is go through these forms, ask any questions that we need to ask. Ultimately, I think the goal here is to try to come out of here with a list of items, a manageable list at a reasonable number to go and work with the mayor on for the budget process for next year. Danny, anything that you want to fill in there?
Yeah, no, that's good, Mike. And I thank everybody for being on the call, and to save everybody, their time tonight. I think by going through the sheet and summarizing it, what we're looking to do is just ask a couple of questions on the projects. This is a start. I've seen this as there's an objective here to get any facilities that we presently have users on, get them up to speed the way they want it to be. There's going to be, to Mike's point, some things I think if we keep it under $100,000 this year, we can get a lot of low-hanging fruit. Some of the projects that were submitted are a little bit more complicated. So if you kind of think about this as a 12 to 18 month process, and I'll give you, for instance, both the Babe Ruth and the Little League requests are complicated, particularly the Little League request. So what I'd like to be able to do on that is just say, we'll make a commitment, Mike, coming off of the Park and Rec full commission meeting, to work with the administration on a long-term game plan on how to address those things, now that we know where people want to go with these projects. But clearly tonight, what we would like to be able to do is get some recommendations off to the Park and Rec Commission to get some things done this fiscal year, and then worry about some of the more complicated ones in next fiscal year. So, Mike, if that being said, I think the old Cindy Gaylowitz here from the old burying ground, that's kind of a little less complicated one. So, you want to start with that one?
Sure, that works for me. So
Great.
Cindy, your items were lighting, tree removal, and invasive plant removal.
Right, correct. Yeah, so the lighting we've been asking for years, and because we have a flagpole with a flag that's not lit, and I think that's against state regulations. And just for the vandalism, we just feel that if the old burying ground were lit, for instance, we went in there yesterday to do some work, and there was a sea of 40 to 50 beer bottles that some kids had just thrown over the fence into the old burying ground. It's just, we run into this all the time, broken stones, etc. So we would just love to get some lighting. When we had some work done on the front gate, the iron person told us that there's actually a conduit in the ground that he thinks is something that can be connected to electricity. So there's certainly electricity right outside on the street. We would just love to have some lighting in there. That was number one.
So just so for priority's sake, the first priority is lighting for the flag pole, right?
Well, lighting in general, but
yeah, entrance lighting in that area.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I don't know how costly it is, but and honestly, if we get cameras in there too, that would be great. But I know that's a big ask, so we'll go for the lighting first. The other huge issue for us are the trees. When we put in the Ingersoll stone replacement last year, John Ingersoll, 9th generation, attended, and he happens to be an arborist. And he spent a great deal of time with us, walking around, just talking to us about the different trees that really need to come down, because as their boughs come down, they come down and smash stones, the irreplaceable stones. So he is willing to offer his services as a consultant for free to help us. We just need someone to come in and take the trees down. We would love some replacement trees. He said that about 70 years ago, evidently Westfield and a lot of other towns put in a lot of, I think they're Norwegian elms, I believe, that are not indigenous to this area and grow very quickly and are great, but now lose their limbs very quickly. And so he's recommending that we take those out and put more indigenous trees in there. And then, of course, the invasive growth, the invasive growth in there, that's just kind of, I mean, we've been asking for that. We go in and do it ourselves, but we just need someone to come in and just kind of clear cut all that, the vines and everything that grow along the fences.
Okay, so on the tree front, I'll ask to Counselor Matthews Kane. I had corresponded with her on the Bullens Field tree situation. That
Mhm.
spot might have been identified in the DCR plan for replanting, because you can do public and private property there, and that would be an easy way. If we could come up with a
Great.
strategy on where to plant it, we could get the trees from the state. So
Perfect.
what I would look to do is on this one, I'll have some follow-up to recommend to the committee, subcommittee for some further action. But especially though, if we have a volunteer consultant willing to
Yeah.
at least tag the trees that he says should be either pruned or removed, that's something that we could, if it's not overly complicated, perhaps have the city do it. If it's something that looks a little bit more like it's involved, maybe we need to hire that out. But that's something we could take a look at once we identify what those trees are.
Well, he actually walked around with us and we made notes of them, but
Yeah,
he will easily come back and do it again
yeah.
and
If
make
you
it.
could put a ribbon on them or something so we could
Sure.
visually see them,
Yeah. Oh, I'd be happy
don't
to.
think we need, I don't think we need to have him come back. I've already gone through them. I know what I'm doing.
Okay.
Okay. So
Great.
that's great that he's offered the help, but we have the help already. So
Terrific. Okay,
the
great.
big focus is, okay, knocking the invasives down. That's great, but they have to, it's a constant effort. I have
Mhm.
I have 4 people now on staff.
And
That's it.
I understand that. I
Well,
totally.
it seems like no one else understands this because everyone's pointing fingers at me, and I'm fine. I'll take the heat. But at the same time, people got to understand that we have 5 positions that are funded, and we're
Sure.
not getting people in these spots. So
Yeah,
I
so
wish we could
Scott,
have done
just
that.
so we don't get bogged down on this, I'm fully aware of the situation you're up against.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking to do is get the feedback from the field users or the facility users, and then we'll address the approach to long-term maintenance at a later date, okay?
Okay.
Trust me, nobody knows it better than I do.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we're not pointing fingers either. We just want it taken out. And we've done a lot of the cutting ourselves. In fact, there's huge piles that are still in there that need to be taken away. And we're happy to do that. But again, we're a very small group too. So, and we don't have the tools that we need to get through that Jumanji growth.
No, understood. So we'll.
Hey, can I just ask a quick question, Scott? Can the Tech Academy Horticultural Department help out in any way, do you think?
Yeah, they can help out with clearing and taking things out. They're still going to need, they'll still need us to come to get the big piles. Are easier for us to just pick them up and take them out to 360 or whatever. But yeah, Nate and his kids can go in there and help clean it out, so to speak. They've done.
Okay, well, that might be something to consider.
Yeah, and
it-
Scott,
they're good.
that I'm sorry that the arborvitae that we talked about. We
Yeah.
went in. My husband and I did a lot of cutting on that, but I'm not an arborist like you are, and so I don't want to go and cut the main arteries of the tree until I know whether that's okay or not.
Sure. This, like Mike said, let's not get, we won't get bogged down in all.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Keep pressing.
So everybody else pretty good with that one?
Yep.
Okay. I see Tanley's on here. That's not a bad one either to do, but that should be kind of quick.
Yep, that's a quick one. There's only one request. It looks like Tammy's location.
Tell me, can you hear me okay? I'm outside at a high school lacrosse game right now, so I just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yep, we can hear you.
you.
Okay, so just real quick, talking about Orinoco soccer fields. We did hire a service to come in and do some seeding and some fertilization with the permission of Jim from Park and Rec. And we put a good chunk of change into it the last 2 years. So I was just kind of looking to now maintain what we have already done to the fields by keeping it well seeded, for injury prevention, a bunch of reasons for that. And just also safely fertilizing so that these kiddos can get out there and practice. There's weed control and there's also bug control. We do have an issue sometimes with bees underground. So that's kind of all I was looking for, was just maybe some maintenance and help with that.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on that one? So Tanley, just so if I might going forward, would there be any like annual amount of money the club could contribute towards that effort?
Oh, absolutely. I did bring it to our board. We're going to pay it regardless.
Yeah.
You know, why I ahead and applied for this. We're going to maintain it anyways. Now that what we've decided with the company and then with our board was we'll do 2 treatments a year and then seed as needed. But yes, I'm sure we can come with something that, you know, I don't want to speak out of term without our treasurer, but we can probably come up with some sort of plan.
Okay, I'll get a hold of you like offline and walk through that a little bit more about what, you know, how much that's costing you and everything, okay?
The cost for this year was going to be $1,900.
Yeah.
So it's 2 payments of $950, one in the spring and one in the fall. And then I don't think we're going to go ahead and seed this year because we just did it in the fall. So I think we'll probably skip a year on that. So right now, this year, we're looking at 19.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody
Hey,
else have any questions on
Mind
that?
if I have, do you?
No, you're good.
Okay.
I'm good
All right.
with you,
Thanks, guys. Bye.
yeah. Okay, thanks. I see Mr. Babinski's in the crowd on Westfield Horseshoe Club.
Yes, can
How
you
are
hear
you?
me? I'm fine. How are you?
Good, sir. So presently, is this something, this type of request, would this be an annual or is it like every couple of years? Or I know like the covers for the courts would be annual, but
The covers for the courts, they've been there for 20 years.
yeah,
And some of them are pretty bad, so I think we could replace. There's 9 courts.
Just a quick.
Yeah. Hello? There's 9 court. Can you hear me?
yeah, we can hear you.
Guys,
Yeah.
Someone's coming in. There's 9 courts. We use 5 of them, so it would be a matter of 10 covers, each pit 3x6, and it's basically you can use burlap, and we don't have that, but we have about a half an inch of heavy rubber that we use for cover, and that wouldn't be too hard to do. I don't know exactly where to get that. The other thing is we're supplied water and lighting by the city of Westfield. And the other thing I had was the fencing. We've never had a problem, but back in 2019, little kid ran right through the horseshoe course while we were playing, and nobody got hurt. We have never had an accident, but I'm just wondering if we should put a fence around the courts.
Has there ever been vandalism, Bill?
No vandalism. We have a shed. We keep our shovels and rakes and scoreboards and wheelbarrow, and we do all the watering of the pit and preparing the clay, and then we police the area after we're done. Usually we start at 6 o'clock. We finish at 9, say, or sometimes 8:30, depending on how many people. We will meet the day after Easter, and we have to see how many people will be playing horseshoes, and then the next week is usually a work week. And so just the covers have been pretty dilapidated, and I was hoping the city of Westfield got us a load of clay about 15 years ago, and there's a mound right along the fence of the ball field adjacent to the courts.
Yeah.
And that's all grown over with grass, but there is clay there. We can still get by with what we have. So the basic thing is we have people occasionally coming onto the courts, and we have to be very careful while the game is in progress. So whether that would be a good idea or not. I don't know how a fence could be constructed. We'd have to take a look at that. But that's about it.
All right, no, that sounds good. Is roughly on an annual basis, how much money, if any, do you put into the upkeep of that facility as a club?
Oh, we don't really, the city mows it, the grass,
Yeah,
and it's probably $100, you know,
okay,
painting stakes. And like I said, the city supplies the water and the
Okay.
clay.
perfect. All right, so anybody have any questions for Bill? Okay. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Okay. Park Square Green wasn't any really big one. That was the health department. They just wanted regular trash pickup. I thought that was being done anyways, but not sure exactly what the situation there was. Westfield on weekends. Is anybody from Westfield on weekends there? Okay, seeing none. They wanted some electricity, extra capacity on the green. That's been a problem for a long time. And then also install electric power at Half Mile Falls. I know those are like ongoing wish list type things, but I'll follow up with the administration later on that and get back to everybody. Right now I'll go, I know St. Mary's and Westfield Tech are playing up at intermediate school right now. So if we want to take a look at their sheet, I don't know if Matt Collins is on the call. Mike, do you see Matt at all?
No, Matt's not here.
So, you know, Westfield Babe Ruth does use this as a practice field. St. Mary's plays their home games there. Batter's Box uses it. The field, I think it was in 2012 or 2013, was rehabilitated. It had grown in over the years since intermediate school was built. Mountain View Landscaping came in and they brought it back to life. They brought back the skinned infield that's up there, and they also brought back the Little League diamond way in the back of the facility. But there really hasn't been a lot done to particularly the 90-foot diamond since that time. I've had a lot of occasion to run across the coaches up there as we're practicing for St. Mary's. So they put together what they've done recently. They removed some overgrown shrubs that were blocking the pathway. But the pitcher's mound's in tough shape. The infield's in tough shape. They do ask, you know, and this has been kind of a perennial ask, some sort of storage unit out back in that area. I know there's a big unit there now, but I don't necessarily know if they have access to that. So there's a little bit of follow-up I'd want to do with Matt and the coaching staff there. But there's clearly some money that could be spent there to bring that field back into a better playing condition. I will note that it's probably one of the poorer fields that they'll play on during the course of their time. So, but that's kind of like a bigger rehab that we'll need to talk a little bit about with administration to see what we can do on that one.
Dan, this is Mike from Westfield Little League. We actually used the two fields, the two smaller fields up there. Yeah. And there is a container up there.
There is.
It's a school container, and the issue is that nobody has access to it unless they have the school key. If it was a combo lock, I think it would be usable by a lot of different organizations.
What's inside the container? Is it all tools, or is there
there's a lot of like soccer equipment in there. I think St. Mary's actually does use it for baseball equipment. We've had stuff in there, but the problem is I'm the only one with the key. Yeah. And so anytime there's a real game up there, I need to go up and open it. So if there was a combo, I think it would make a lot of sense. There's a lot of space in the container.
Yeah.
Back in the Babe Ruth days, so we used to use that field for practice, and we had a key to it. And that was where like the L screen was. The bases were in there, that kind of stuff, rakes, things like that. There wasn't a groomer there. There wasn't any, power equipment there, but, the liner, that kind of stuff was in there. But I believe we had keys as Babe Ruth coaches and managers. But I agree. I mean, if there's a lock up there, if there's a combination lock, that, probably probably fixes the issue. And
Yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I mean, the other thing is, you know, that field up there, and you know, those fields that were redone, the one way out back, and then that skin infield. The biggest issue is just is if we're going to make the expenditure to make the changes and do the improvements, it's the ongoing maintenance of it, right? I mean, there's and I know I'm not saying anything that everybody here doesn't already know, but if we are gonna, you know, outlay a significant amount of money up there, and I'm not advocating that, you know, for or against it at this point, but if we are going to do it, we definitely need to make sure that there's, you know, the ongoing portion of it.
Yeah, so my thought, Mike, on that is because there's 3 different users, Batters Box, St. Mary's, and Westfield Little League, and well, actually there's 4, but Babe Ruth, is that if we can get it back to a better playable condition, all 3 of those fields, we could look at what a annual maintenance contract would be and see if there's some sort of in-kind contribution or some sort of donation that can be made by the organizations to see where it is. But the first thing would start with getting it all back into a better playable condition. And then, you know, like I said, Mountain View could go on like or whatever company, it'd have to be publicly procured, could go on like you know, some sort of maintenance schedule on that, and that could maybe be worked in, or the cost, there could be a cost share amongst a number of the groups. And I think if you do it that way, it becomes more financially manageable for everybody. I wouldn't think that ongoing maintenance or running through there with an infield groomer, particularly once in a while, is going to be overly expensive. I agree with Scott in that over the years, we've relied too much on homegrown city or school department help, and the infrastructure is just too large. So one of the things that, you know, we were able to do years ago was to, you know, bring a vendor on board to make these assists. So you give them the list of what it is you want to do and the schedule, and you quote that out, and then you get that on a maintenance contract. So, but that's something that we're going to all have to sit down as users and take a look how we want to approach that.
Yeah, agreed.
Again, can I just add to that? This is Brent.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know, everybody knows the drum I'm beating, right? I mean, with that maintenance piece, we really need to get a handle on who's responsible for what too. That's the other piece of this, and the structure of that maintenance. If we are, to Mike's point, if we're going to spend the money, and I'm all in, you know, on all these organizations to be a part of it. But right now, I'm not sure if one hand knows what the other hand is doing at a given moment.
No, and I agree with you on that, Brent. And I would say that that facility up there has been kind of like, because it's school department controlled, it's not as well known as to who, you know, I mean, it's obviously some problem, but it's not well known how to participate as a partner in that. So I would think like using the Starfires model, not that that's a great lease, by the way, so don't slay me on that, but, you know, some sort of, let's lay out what the any kind of financial contribution or in-kind contribution can be done, much like what's done at Bullens and at the Little League complexes every year. That should be memorialized so everybody knows what the expectations are.
Yep, understood. It's been a long time that it's plagued us, so it's.
No, I don't disagree.
And I appreciate your input on this. I know you went through it, so I appreciate you kind of spearheading this. So
yeah, I mean, you know, Mike, you know, this, like I said, we put almost $100,000 into that complex in 2012, it was roughly, right about, and it's all for naught now, you know, a decade later for sure. So we would like to avoid that kind of scenario. And Mike Raposo knows, because he and I dialogued a lot years ago about this. There was constant battling about the groomer, this or that. And we want to kind of just avoid that, come up with a workable arrangement that schools, Park and Rec, and the administration and all the different user groups can live with, you know, so.
And there's a lot of other sports.
There are, yeah.
Male and female, for that matter.
And just to let you know, by the way, and that you raise a good point, so everybody's clear on this. Every single user that uses a Park and Rec facility or field was solicited with a request to put in information, and Mike can verify for me. So we sent it all out by email. And these are the only respondents we got back.
It was actually, it was email and US
US mail. Yeah. So anybody want to kick anything more around with the intermediate field?
I'm good.
You good? Everybody good? All right. Let's, if you don't mind, Mike Raposo, because you're a little bit more complicated than everybody here. If we want to move to Westfield Babe Ruth, that's a little bit easier to do. I know I saw Annalise up on the roster here. So something for the Park and Rec Commission to think about. One of the bones of contention with Babe Ruth in the Starfires lease was, under the lease, Babe Ruth is not allowed to advertise on the fencing. So I've been on the board of Babe Ruth now a couple of years, and from what I understand, and Annalise is here, she can put in some more information. That was a direct cost to Babe Ruth of $6,000 a year, at least that amount for advertising. So, you know, without any consideration for that, Starfires comes in and that was it. So we do know that Starfires lease is up with the city shortly, and there'll be an opportunity to negotiate that. But I think clearly that's an area where Babe Ruth would like to have a chance to sit at the table, because there's no doubt Babe Ruth puts in the lion's share of money and maintenance at that facility, and they should not be shut out like that would happen. And that's no fault of anybody. It just was, we didn't know any better at the time, from what I understand. That being said, we do have a working agreement as Babe Ruth with Starfires, where they pay us is it per game, Annalise, for the equipment, use of Babe Ruth equipment?
Yeah, we're in the process of renegotiating that for this year due to improvements and the kind of cost increase that we had. So we're in the process of renegotiating that, but the expectation is that they will be paying us per game, and we'll send a bill per month, every month.
Okay. So Annalise, what was the total investment with the field improvements that were done in the off season this past year? Do you have that number handy? We voted like 30.
It was right around 30,000.
Right. So I had shared with Mike, I think, the long-term wish list Babe Ruth had for Yakuma and for Bullens, and the board is very supportive of continuing chipping away at this wish list, if you will. But in order to kickstart it, we thought over the off season, maybe we could, this is where this kind of came from, enlist the city to see if there's certain other things that can be brought to the table with some additional help. So this is, you know, we're ongoing doing some things. There's some things here that are more costly. But I will say that we could probably sit down with the administration and Park and Rec with Babe Ruth and kind of plan out what this improvement schedule looks like for the two fields, and see and come to an agreement on cost sharing, because Board of Directors is already supportive of moving forward with this. But if we have city help, it'll all go faster. And I think for the amount of use Bullens gets, Tech, high school, Starfires, Babe Ruth, it's a pretty good deal that Babe Ruth is offering. So a couple other things that are a little bit more complicated. I did talk to Counselor Matthews Kane. She did indicate this whole complex is in that DCR tree planting footprint. So if we wanted to solicit DCR to come in and, you know, if you go look back at the historical photographs of Bullens Field and the Yakuma Field Complex and Municipal Playground, that whole thing from the football bleachers wrapped around King Street, Hubbard Street, and on Franklin Street was lined with trees. It was beautiful at one time. And over the years, we put a few back. We've taken way more down in the past. But that's something that we're probably going to need some contractor assistance on. But she said the biggest problem with the DCR program, and this is Scott's issue for sure, and we'd have to talk about how we can address this. It's the agreement to water the trees for 2 years, apparently. So there would be a lot of trees that would get installed, and that's a big lift, and we'd have to talk a little bit about how that could be done. So, but there's that. The other issue, I think that's not always talked a lot about, but there is a significant amount of erosion occurring at the side of the bleachers coming down from the upper campus parking lot. And, you know, we almost lost the bleachers when we were doing the repair work to get ready for the World Series. And something like that is just not, it's a safety hazard, but I think that should be something that we should kind of put back on the radar screen and probably get some sort of landscape architect plan to arrest that erosion, because it's just going to get worse as time goes on, and that's not good for the complex in general. But Annalise, this is your Babe Ruth list, so if you want to go from there.
Thanks, Dan. Sorry, I'm in the car. I was finishing up the game with St. Mary's up at North Middle. So like Dan said, this offseason, Babe Ruth kind of made a wish list, if you will. We had a really successful regional tournament last year, so we had a little bit more money than we normally would. And so we first invested in kind of repairing the Bullens infield and the Bullens lip, if you will, at third base. So we put about 3 or 4 feet of turf around pretty much the whole infield, including around the outfield grass. And then we put turf and sod down the first and third baselines, which already has saved us quite a few games this year already. Sorry, I'm trying to look at another phone on the list. The kind of bigger items that are on our wish list, the requests that we would love. The first one being additional grass behind home plate. Right now, our tarp doesn't fully fit around the circle of dirt at the infield. So we did repair right around the edge, but we'd love to take the grass back another 10 feet or so behind where it is right now, kind of making the gravel driveway, if you will, a little smaller. And we'd love to continue that down the first and third baselines just to make it a little more aesthetically pleasing down, having a nice clean line. To do that, we would also need a new sprinkler behind home plate just to keep that growing. We did have somebody come out, and this was before I took over, so I'm sorry, I'm not 100% on the specifics of who it was, but somebody did come out and give us an estimate on that as well, just saying that we would need to add in one more sprinkler line. Additionally, we would love to upgrade our batting cage. This year, we put in 2 brand new batting cages that we had purchased prior, and one was donated from the batter's box and Tim Kelleher. So our team installed that at field day this year, but we would love to kind of put in something that would help us maintain that a little bit long term. Right now, baseballs get eat up in that gravel that's out there. We would love to kind of model what Little League has down at their batting cages. Matt Barnes on our board did share a picture, and our board of directors really loved that, kind of keeping it very turf and clean. So that's something we would love. Additionally, we would love to rebuild the Bullens Mound. Right now, it takes quite a significant amount of work every game to get that mound ready. There seems to constantly be a lip and a divot that no matter how much we put in there, it just never goes away. So that's something that takes a lot of maintenance for us, but we would love to just kind of rebuild that from square one. Additionally, and we did go to Parks and Rec with this prior to the season starting, just saying that it was something that we anticipated the Starfires asking for, but that Babe Ruth would not be willing to fund, was the fence improvements along the first baseline. Right now, it's kind of a low grade fence material that's already worn away, mainly from the opposing FCBL teams putting their bands on and pulling their bands and stretching. It just wasn't built for that. So right now that's hugely bowed in. And again, it's just not very aesthetically pleasing. We don't quite think that it's a safety hazard at the moment, but I definitely think it can get there if the use continues to be what it is. And additionally, it just kind of ends, and then there's a different fence that's tacked on at the end. So we'd love to make it just one uniform, nice grade fence, probably modeling what is in front of the dugouts right now. We put together a few options that we presented to Parks and Rec earlier this year, and just kind of 3 different grades of metal and what could be done with those. Like you said, Dan, that erosion near the bleachers on the first baseline has been something that we've looked at for years, and always have just kind of said for the past maybe 5 years, that's really unsafe. We definitely don't want people on it. And although we keep that top fence that's in the WTA parking lot closed, people find their way over there. Mainly we find that the kids are running up and down that hill, and people hold their breath looking at people running up and down that hill. it's pretty bad with roots sticking out. And we've talked about options like stairs coming down there, or just kind of rebuilding the grass that's there. Not really sure exactly what would be the best option, but what's there right now is pretty unsafe for everybody that's there. And along with that, we had also talked about exactly what you said, Dan, the tree removal and tree installation. The trees out in dead center field, I think, are getting a little close to being gone soon. They just kind of sway in the wind, and you hope they don't come down. And then we also talked about replacing the field along King and Hubbard Street. Right now, it's just has like a barbed wire on the top, and it's been there for as long as I can remember. It's pretty old, and we'd love to replace that again, similarly to replacing the first baseline fences. But like Dan said, we just kind of are happy to ask for help now. When we had talked to the mayor earlier this year, and trying to put together a contract between Ruth and the city, which we've never had before. And part of what they asked is just, how much money has Babe Ruth put into the field, and what kind of work do we do? And maybe a year ago, our past president, Dan Welch, kind of monetized everything that Babe Ruth has done between field day, between the field maintenance, between cutting the grass, things like that. So we're kind of really happy that we might be getting some help to help upkeep the field. Most of the maintenance does fall on us, so we're pretty happy.
Annalise, can you talk real briefly about the Yakuma Field wish list, because that's in tough shape too?
Yeah, I didn't include that on the original one that I had sent in. One of the biggest requests at Yakuma, there's two major ones that we've talked about now for years. Number one was rebuilding the Yakuma Mound. Right now it's in really rough shape. And at the moment, Babe Ruth doesn't have any solid plans to be using that for anything other than practice. But if the rain keeps going like it has the past week, then we definitely will be needing that. So rebuilding that mound, it's in way worse shape than the Bullens Mound. And it takes a lot of manpower to get it ready. And additionally, the dugouts at Yakuma have been something that's been on Babe Ruth's kind of to-do list for years now. And it's just never gotten done. It's probably been on there for 10 years, and it's just never gotten done. It's kind of always fallen to the wayside. Those are two of the biggest ones. Really, the whole infield needs to get redone. We had plans to also put in the turf baselines up the first and third baseline last year. We were planning to do that at the same time we did all the work at Bullens, but they just ran out of turf. They didn't have any left. They didn't have any other sod to put down. So that was talk that they were doing that this year. They just haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, and that field, that sees a lot of use too over the year, so some of these things are challenging because you'd have to schedule the maintenance to be done off season to make it stick,
Yeah,
but
the
that's
Bullens
more complicated. Yeah,
the Bullens work was pretty challenging. Once April hits, we can't do any work really, big work like that on Bullens. It's used during Babe Ruth, and obviously, like you said, for Westfield High, Westfield Technical Academy, and then the Starfire start around Memorial Day. So that's why we did it in the fall. But the fall also runs into, a tough time. We're playing fall ball on the field, and there's a football goalpost, and then it gets cold. So we were kind of racing the clock last year, trying to get that work done.
yeah. Mike, any questions for Annalise?
Yeah, a couple comments. Where do I start? So I guess on the fence. So these are all conversations I've had with Dan on multiple occasions. So actually, none of these requests are brand new, at least as far as Park and Rec goes. We didn't really get too deep into the Yakuma repairs because Yakuma is a school property. So as a Park and Rec commission, we don't have the control over that. But as far as the Bullen stuff goes, I know we did talk about the fencing in particular, and it was cited as a potential safety issue. I think based on the maybe there's another section of fencing required or something like that. I know there's the mesh was not of high enough grade, strong enough grade to support the bands and all that kind of stuff. But there was, I believe, a section of fence that was cited as being needed that was a safety concern. Is that true?
Yeah, the first section, there's really kind of two sections. One is a black material that was put in when the Starfires came. And so that's the section that just is maybe more aesthetic. Right where the kind of add a play line is, right in front of the new covering that's there. That's where it becomes unsafe. It's this really, I'm not sure how to describe it. It's a gray fence, and there's big cinder blocks on the bottom that are kind of holding it in. It's not really even in the ground. So that's the part that I would consider the most unsafe. And we'd love to just make it one uniform fence that's there.
And then, so I guess just a general comment, Dan, is, if we're aiming at, potentially $100,000 here in terms of asks, and we're looking to spread that among multiple properties, I feel like if we're going to pick items off of each of these lists, if there are any safety concerns, I feel like those should probably be the first and foremost things that we prioritize. The aesthetics is nice. But the safety stuff, the last thing we want is for somebody to get hurt down there. The other question I had was as far as tree removal, and this is a concern that we've had from neighbors down there, from folks in that neighborhood is, and I know if you take a tree away, you've got to put a tree back, and that's kind of what we've been talking about and working on. But the other thing that we need to be cognizant of is that those trees, that given their age and maturity and everything, not just, yes, they're a safety hazard, we don't want them to fall down, but they also provide a certain amount of sound insulation for the announcements, both at the football field and the baseball field. So I just want to make sure that when we're talking about taking the trees down and putting them back, that we're just thinking about, the sound insulation as well as, the aesthetics and the ornamental features of them, and so on and so forth. So those really were the two things that I had kind of jotted down as being, as wanting to bring up.
Mike?
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Do you recall what the cost of that pavilion that's down at Bowen's? Do you recall what the cost of that was?
I don't know what the cost was, but I know it was purchased with the grant that we received. Mayor Humison was involved. I want to say the grant was like $25,000 or something like that. But I don't know. I don't know that is what the cost of the pavilion was. Scott, did you have a?
I think the between the pavilion and having them install it came right out to 25 grand.
So the point I want to make is we spent $25,000 on a pavilion, and I don't believe any of these groups were consulted about what that 25 grand should be used for. And there are a few things on this list that could have been knocked out, and it's just been kind of a thorn in my paw since then. And Mike, you can kind of back me up on this, that Park and Rec, we were not even consulted on it. So that's irritating. And I don't know where that came from, but I felt I just needed to say it because 25 grand could have been spent in a lot better places, according to what Annalise is saying.
Yes. And when all this happened, it was the beginning of COVID. And there wasn't a lot of, trust me, I'm not making excuses. I'm just letting you know what was going on. There was meetings. We had meetings. It's my fault. I should have said something to the Park and Rec Commission, but it was just moving along. And I assumed, which I shouldn't have, that somebody knew what was going on. It was a lot of money, and the mayor was involved. He got the money, and we were asking, what do you guys want to do? They asked me. I said, yeah, I'll take it. We could spend it on fertilizer and pesticides and whatnot. But why don't we think of something a little more tangible? And that's when Babe Ruth was like, well, we'll pay for the scoreboard. Let's use the money someplace else. Like, okay. So it whittled down to, we looked at doing new dugouts, but the price was astronomical when to put a dent in it because it has to be ADA compliant. So it came down to this one thing, the pavilion. So that's how it got there. And I'll take the heat on it that I didn't notify the commission about it. But there was so much involvement. I assumed that you guys knew something that was going on, but.
And I don't want to get away from the discussion, so I'll just say one more thing and then I'm going to let this go. But, I feel like it was specifically put in for the Starfire's use. They're the ones that really use this. Babe Ruth's never needed a pavilion. I was involved with the program for years. It's not something that we needed as a group down there. So, and Dan Knappich, to your point, they've got a hell of a deal down there, and now they got a $25,000 pavilion to sell their beer in. So, but I'm gonna let it go.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So Dan, yes, I don't know if anybody else has questions or comments for Annalise, or if we should move to the next item here. I think we still have one more pretty significant one here.
Yeah. So Mike, what I would suspect we should do, particularly with a big one like this one here at Little League at Babe Ruth, is follow up. We'll have a meeting with Scott, the DPW, in the case of school interaction, any of the school department staff that we should have available, and we can kind of work our way through some of these things and prioritize it and come up with a couple-year strategy to do that. So I didn't want anybody with the impression that, it's not like we're going to do this event, we're going to forget about it. You've all brought up some really good long-term thorns that have been in a lot of people's sides, and the whole idea behind this effort is to make a substantial long-term commitment to fixing it all. So, and without any further ado, then I turn it over to Mike Raposo.
May I just ask, do you need me to stay on or may
No,
I
no,
leave?
you're good, Cindy. We're good.
Okay.
No, Cindy,
Thank you. Okay, thanks so much. I appreciate anything
Thanks.
that you
Thanks,
said.
Cindy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So Dan, do you want me to go through the things or do you want to go through them first?
Yeah, I mean, so ultimately, I think to capture Mike's, I know there's a problem with the concession or with the press box, whatnot at Cross Street. It's got some rot going on, and that concession stand is ridiculously outdated and time for a change. So I want to thank Mike for kind of like thinking outside the box on this one. We do have that nice reactivated concrete pavilion that's out there. Now there's a new field there. This is a little bit more, this is where it gets kind of complicated, and we'd have to bring in an engineering company to come up with a diagram as to what it would look like, blueprints to demolish and all this kind of stuff. I think it's all doable, but that's definitely like a 24 to 36 month process at Cross Street to get that to where it should go, So what I would recommend, Mike Terrell, would be that I can spend some time kind of working out like a critical path on a project like that with Tammy Teft in the purchasing department to take a look at like what kind of milestones, when you would need to hit those, and the kind of dollar value to bring on board an engineering firm to start like a schematic anyways. And that's kind of the approach to doing something that's that involved. It's a little bit of an ordeal. And I could come back to the commission with a cost on what that engagement for that would be.
Yeah, that's we're looking at big dollar numbers here for this stuff, right? Like not so much the new dugouts at Sadie Knox and the third
Cross Street's a big dollar value. I'm not going to kid you. That's
Cross Street's a huge number.
Yeah,
and not that I wasn't my kids came through, my son came through Little League, and I share the desire to have that stuff down there. But, we are also talking about one organization using that field or that facility. So I do think, it's got to be something. If we're going to look at funding any of that, we've got to be looking to spread that over, over the course of years.
Yeah.
That's a big number. I mean,
that complex
figures at least,
probably
right?
hasn't seen any improvement of magnitude and other than what just happened recently and since 1954 when the original founders got together, so it is what it is, but
I will.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, and I'll go back to sort of the original. There's two, to me, there's two things here, and one of them is what would ultimately be sort of the ideal scenario down there, and I think that's what we've described as these in this list. I will say that press box is a hazard. So at the very least, and I mean, this goes back to 2014, 2015. When my son and Scott's son were involved in Little League, it was a safety hazard then, and people didn't feel safe being in it. It really only gets used, or at least it only did get used back then during All-Star season for the most part, and big playoffs, stuff like that. But I think I do think that, aside from the list that we have right here, that press box either needs to be just torn down completely, or it needs to be torn down and rebuilt, sort of outside of the big master plan of, if there is one, of moving the concession stand and all that kind of stuff.
So
if we're going to pull something out of like this list, I think that is the top priority in terms of safety down there.
I agree. So when we started to talk about all this on the Little League side, it was, we need to replace the press box. And the second question was, well, if we replace the press box, what kind of press box can we actually get? Does it have to be, can it be elevated still? Can it not be elevated still? So that's kind of where I came up with this concept of moving concessions over to the middle of the two fields into the existing gazebo, and going more in the direction of the bleachers in back of home plate, which would have a ramp to get to a new press box that would be elevated. So that was kind of the idea there. That's, I guess, the press box is what kind of sparked all of this, really. But I think some of the other things on the list are more doable and more needed at this point. I mean, the press box is definitely something that needs to be dealt with, but dugouts, the new field, we don't have any dugouts. So that would be one thing. The third field at Paper Mill, we actually had designs. I think Dan might have actually had the designs drawn for us probably about eight or 10 years ago. The new field would go basically where the old tennis courts were. And that kind of gets back to what we were talking about with the intermediate school of, if the field is actually at a complex where we can maintain it, it will get maintained. And we won't have to have a huge cost of coming in and basically starting over. And that field, we would basically only use it for really young kids and then potentially older kids just to have an infield to practice on. So the backstop could be very minimal. It would just be there to basically stop balls that, like a coach pitched. We wouldn't play with the older kids. We wouldn't play games with the older kids there. So it could be quite a bit smaller than what we have even at the second field at Cross Street. And then we would probably still need fencing along the baselines in order to have kids, if there were games there, the kids would be behind a fence.
A little bit of land.
And then Sadie Knox, the front field, those dugouts, I was up there recently and they're about to fall down. So those are just in need of complete overhaul. The backfield, we're actually getting the roofs replaced on those dugouts within the next couple weeks. So those dugouts are going to stay as they are. Paper Mill's dugouts are fine. The cross street field one dugouts are starting to get to be a safety hazard, especially the one on the first base side. Starting to really, the wood is starting to deteriorate quite a bit. So
Which ones
those are
are those,
kind of
Mike?
all the cross street field one. The wood, especially on the first base dugout, is starting, like one of the ends is starting to fall off completely. The roof
Is it
is like collapsing.
Okay, is it the sheathing or is it the roofing or is it the main supports?
The support on the right, I don't know if someone hung on it or something like that, and it knocked it off completely. So one day I came and it was like sideways. So it's up there now to a place, but it really just needs to be either torn down and replaced completely or really renovated quite a bit.
Understood.
Dan or Mike, or even Mike Raposo or Mike Terrell, where are we with the lease with the Starfires though? Is it, and not that I've seen this in a long time, and I know, I read it a while back. Has it ever been renewed, or how many more years do we have on that particular thing?
I think
Because
it's
I'm
up
not
in
seeing
2 years.
that, I mean, that kind of maintenance should be eaten up sometimes with other organizations too. So
It's up in 2 years, I think. So
I think it was
this year and next.
I think it was a
5 year.
5-year lease, and I think we're on year 3. So yeah,
There's renewals though in it, Mike, like there's trigger renewals on it that don't allow for significant changes by either party to occur. So if there's something we're gonna do with them, it has to be agreed to.
lost you
It
guys.
really does. Yeah.
Yeah, understood. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
sorry about that. I lost you for a second.
So I just have a question on the paper mill additional field. Mike, can you just talk a little bit about where the deficiencies are in the program today without that particular field? And the numbers, I'm just concerned with the decline in numbers, why we'd want to go and add another field. It would be great, but I struggle with building new fields when we're trying to maintain the ones that we have. So I'm curious to hear the kind of strap it's putting the league under not having that field.
Yeah, so essentially, once games start, so once opening day hits and we start to have games, the teams generally have very limited practice opportunities on a real field. We do use the intermediate fields. We'll have teams. There'll be 2 teams there a night a lot of the time. So that's really the biggest issue, is the practice situation. And we have more 6 to 8 year olds than we have 9 to 12 year olds right now. So the numbers of young kids are growing quite a bit. In fact, so 6 year olds, the most we've ever had before this year was 45, and this year we have 65. And from what I'm told, Park and Rec has quite a few kids in T-ball. So I think it seems that the numbers are growing, and we actually hear that quite a bit across the board from other leagues in our district, where their numbers at the young levels are very high right now. So I don't know. It seems to be growing again, which is a good thing. So that's where kind of the extra fields would help.
So I guess what you're saying is then that there's no place for the kids to practice. If all of the fields that Little League is maintaining right now are used for games, there's no other spots to go in the city to practice?
Aside from intermediate school, which is not maintained, I would say yes. Right now, so this year we have 40 teams that share, Hamden Ponds has 1 field, Stady has 2, Paper Mill 2, and Cross 2. So 7 fields. And so it just becomes a crunch for practices.
Yeah, I mean, I just came off a Little League, between what Mike's saying, we were always struggling for practice field. We'd sometimes go to that old crappy field at Southampton Road School. And the place that I ended up going to, almost like my go-to spot, was behind Franklin. And that ended up in, almost nobody knew that was there. It was in tough shape, but you could pick a night almost any night during the week, 2 nights a week, hit it, and nobody would be there. So it was a constant battle. Little League did a nice job with their spreadsheet so coaches could go in and identify what facilities were available. But you were always battling it, you know, as to when you showed up, if somebody was going to be there or not, you know?
Is Munger Hill an option for people or no?
Well, some coaches do go up there, but that's in tough shape too. I mean,
Yeah, I know it's not maintained. Yeah.
Yeah, so softball about 5 years ago put a lot of money into renovating is general. They really didn't renovate that much. They put some dirt down and they got it playable for practice. But again, we don't have the equipment there, so they just couldn't maintain it, and it just went back to being grown in, and they've kind of abandoned that for practice at this point. So there's backstop. Yeah. Go ahead.
I just have one other question. Tim, I mean, I don't want to put Tim O'Connor on the spot, but maybe Tim, because I know we just did the elementary school. Can you speak to the numbers at all in those younger grades? I mean, are we seeing an influx with the 6 to 8 year olds and even younger than that, or?
We haven't yet, but I don't have any of the preschool numbers, Brent, to speak about. But it looks historically like the numbers were going down. There might be a boost coming up, below those grades, but I don't know.
Okay.
just to fill in a little blank on paper mill. So the plan was back in like 2015, it was actually going to be a city run project. We had a plan drawn up, and DPW at the time had offered to build the field, a very basic skinned infield type operation there. So it's not like it was a huge lift to do that. And in fact, I want to say Mountain View's cost to do the skinned infield up at where intermediate school is now was not a huge dollar value investment. And that's why we started taking down that. I think it was a inline skating park that used to be a paper mill or something. Before it was a tennis court, and then they got rid of that and they put that skating thing in there that never really took off. And then so the baseball field or soft, whatever field you want to put there made sense to put it there. And that's where we were headed. And then I left the job. So.
I have another question.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott. Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button.
Looking at Hampton Ponds, it says none at this time. So I know that past President Ken Daigle, I was talking to him this weekend, and he actually wants to go up there and he wants to start getting it to a nice condition for, I guess there's 3 senior league teams this year and one out of, I think he said Agawam.
Well, yeah, Holyoke's going to join us.
Holyoke.
Yep.
So, and I've been up there, and why wasn't Hampton Ponds considered for any of this money?
So we just basically it got abandoned for a couple of years. And to fill you in, Ken actually, the Park and Rec went up and actually fixed the field up quite a bit. They used the groomer and they got the baselines going pretty good. They got the infield going pretty good. Darren Yvonne has rebuilt the mound. I guess, well, when this all came about, we didn't even know we would have a senior league this year. So there really wasn't, it really wasn't on the docket to put money into a facility that we just have inconsistent numbers from year to year. Based on the numbers we have now, I can't even see senior league continuing. It's Babe Ruth will take most of the kids and we'll maybe have 1 or 2 teams. And if we have that, then we end up using the intermediate field for that 1 or 2 teams rather than putting funds into Hampton Ponds. But this year was unique. We had 3 teams, and so we got it going. So that's kind of where we are with that.
So at this point, would you say that, maybe some money should be allocated there based on the current scenario, or no?
I would not. Based on the number of players we have overall, I would allocate the money to the facilities that are more used by more players.
I've always had a kind of a soft spot for the kids that don't make Babe Ruth, that don't get to play on Bullens, and they just get thrown up at Hampton Ponds. And again, I'm not saying that that's why there's a decline in the numbers in that particular age group, but maybe if they had a nice facility that was respected, it could grow. So I personally, $50,000 at paper mill it would go to Hampden Ponds. That's where I would put the money. But just my thought.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns for Mike in terms of Little League? Okay. This was our last item. Dan, any closing thoughts before we adjourn here for the evening?
Yeah, I think, like everything else, this is the very first time we've tried to put together like a comprehensive solicitation of users. And as you can, even on this call, each one of us, because of our own experience as parents or being participants in the league, we've known some of these thorny spots, and it just never seems to get to the point where it ever got enough traction. And, to Babe Ruth's credit, that keeps the complex down there looking nice. To Little League's credit, they've done an awful lot. And, everything around us has just gotten older and older and older. And, one of the things that really rubbed me the wrong way over the years was what happened at intermediate, where we put in 100 Gs and we wasted it. And so, I had a meeting with the mayor before we started this effort. He was very supportive on this. I think, there's some walkaways here. We clearly need to identify those projects that are a little bit longer fuse, like the Cross Street one for sure. And then put those on a different track. But for what's in front of the Park and Rec Commission now, I think it would be fair to say I'll take the notes in on this, and I'll write up something that I think is a doable thing this year. One of the problems with doing this kind of exercise so late in the year, and this is the way this was originally imagined to go. Remember, free cash goes away on June 30th. Okay. And based on the playing schedules and everything, it's hard to get any work done during the seasons too. So one of the things is we won't see free cash again until it gets certified after the tax rate gets set sometime in December, right? So it's like, if we're going to make a move on some of this easier stuff, we need to get to the mayor. And remember, everything under $10,000, you just need to solicit a quote. You don't necessarily need to do a high complicated bidding process. So that was one of my goals, is to identify those things that we could actually get done maybe this year. But in the end, because of the play schedule being what it is, maybe we, and a lot of this stuff, particularly at Bullens, we would need to have enough money set aside in reserve, or just carry this information over to the fall when free cash gets recertified again and go back at it. Ideally, what we'd like to be able to do is open up a line item in the Park and Rec maintenance account, if you will, for this stuff, so that we can start chipping away at it, right? If, say, for instance, we get a solicitation at Cross Street for an engineering firm to come up with some schematics on that, maybe that's $8,000, and that could be a free cash. That could be done this year. You could get a contract signed and the work delivered before the end of the fiscal year. Maybe. It all depends on the workload. So some of this is going to seem like it bogged down a little bit because of procurement, availability of consultants potentially. But I think what I'll do is, like I said, I'll synthesize and try to find those projects that we talked about tonight that are easiest to do. I also think there's WTA could have a role to play here. One of the things I'm mindful, because I use them an awful lot when I was in office, is you can't pay the kids from the city. So, it's not like when they go do a house, they actually make money on that, right? They get typically a donation, or the homeowner pays. And so, like, what they always complained about is when they were busy doing city projects, that didn't allow them to go off and do work that was paying their extra shop budgets. So that was one of those. And my trade-off to them was, well, we'll do $100,000 every year to replenish the shop budgets off of free cash. Tim, I'm not sure if you were on the school committee at the time, but that was, back a few, Jim Brown was a supporter of that, and Ralph Figge. So we used to do an extra appropriation to put into the shop budgets, because we used horticulture, we used graphics, we used all these guys in carpentry, especially construction tech. So there's logistical things that you have to, if you want to use them for something, you have to kind of figure out how best you can get them to participate with you, because I think there's a role for them to play, but it can get complicated. And the other thing is just in general, interfacing with the school department. You don't normally hand money over to the school department from the city side. It's got to be appropriated to school department maintenance, and the school department handles it from there. So this is going to be on the school side, fields and facilities, a little bit more complicated. We're going to have some more dialogue, but I'm committed to making this thing work over the next 24 months or thereabouts, and making a dent in this stuff. And I also like to think about memorializing the level of effort that each organization brings to the table, so it gets recognized. To Scott's point, we have cut back. And one of the things that what I was able to do an awful lot with, between ROCA, which is a program that doesn't cost a lot of money, you can bring in teams of workforce to do some of this kind of clearing work, between the sheriff's department, between the tech academy, and we reinstalled summer labor years ago. There was like a multi-pronged approach to address these, like what I call things that happen in the summer: routine maintenance, trimming things back, getting rid of invasives, mowing things. It gets complicated because you got to be 18 to run power equipment. But if you bring in some of these organizations like the sheriff or ROCA, they bring their own equipment. But you got to plan that out ahead of time. You might not be able to get a sheriff's crew in town right now until the fall, say. So if we're going to make a commitment, stay at the table on maintenance for the long term, I can write up the plan and talk to these different stakeholders on how that looks like, and try to memorialize some of these agreements going forward.
Yeah, that all sounds good, Dan. And it all makes sense, right? There's, I think everything you said there is stuff that, we've all talked about here for some time, and the fact that we're able to sort of put people together and hopefully get a start on an ongoing, repeatable maintenance plan here is a step in the right direction. So I'm going to just kind of wrap up here by thanking everybody for being here. Those that have stuck it out till the end here, and also those that were on here earlier. Thank you guys so much. And Dan, I'll compare notes with you following the meeting, and then we'll work to put together a list to bring to Park and Rec for the next meeting, so that we can get to the mayor here in a timely manner.
So Mike Raposo, I'll follow up offline with you. Where Scott is on what his request is, but we're going to have to, if we want to act on something sooner rather than later, we're just going to need to get what's the desired, quick project that would be most important to get. I mean, the press box was brought up and whatnot, but so we're going to need a little help on prioritizing things. And if it's
third field at Paper Mill would be the priority.
Okay, fair enough. And then from there, once that comes out on paper, it'd be up to the commission to advance those recommendations to the mayor's office.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you, Lenore, for putting the meeting together, and we'll be in touch. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
So people go.